Hello and welcome to the Lair of Legless Legends. I'm Scarlet Nightshade and today we're going to be discussing dragon snakes. Dragon snakes, or Xenodermis javanicus, are an interesting species of snake unlike any other. Most renowned for their dragon-like appearance, dragon snakes have a reputation for being difficult to keep in captivity. However, there's a lot of misconception on why exactly they're difficult to keep. First and foremost, the challenges in keeping them have absolutely nothing to do with husbandry. In fact, I would go as far as to say that the husbandry for this species is probably the easiest aspect of keeping them. One major factor that is often dismissed is the stressful process of import and export. With wild-caught imports, it's important to remember that not only are they being removed from the environment in which they are familiar with, but they are also being exchanged to the hands of several different people with a constantly changing environment. This experience is stressful for any species of snake, but most especially for the dragon snake, as they're known for their exceptional fragility. Unfortunately, as a result of this stress, their immune system is weakened and they're more vulnerable to parasites and disease. Then you enter an entire other realm of keeping wild-caught imports, which is treating them for said parasites and disease. Precision is extremely important. With dragon snakes, it is very easy to make a mistake that could be fatal, which means knowledge and experience with other wild-caught imports goes a long way. If you are not accustomed to successfully establishing wild-caught imports, do not keep dragon snakes. More often than not, wild-caught imports come with at least one ailment that you'll have to know how to diagnose and treat in order for them to thrive. Such ailments include respiratory infection, snake fungal disease, scale and mouth rot, disectasis, protozoa, and so on and so forth. All of that said, you have to know how to spot the subtle signs for such diseases, and know how to treat them effectively in a manner that is suitable for the species. Of course, in order to treat these diseases, you'll need to have the necessary medications on hand. This includes, but is not limited to, metronidazole, fenbendazole, praziquantel, and silver sulfadiazine. Almost all of the medications I listed are prescription only, meaning you're going to have to consult with a veterinarian in order to acquire them. Which brings me to my next point. A common misconception many people assume is that you want to take a wild-caught import directly to the veterinarian. After the stressful experience they've already been through, this is the last thing you want to do. While a medical evaluation is certainly important, stressing your newly acquired wild-caught import further by being poked and prodded usually does more harm than good. Instead, you want to establish a good relationship with your herp veterinarian and acquire any medications you may need through telemedicine, which allows your snake to receive the medical care it needs without a stressful trip to the veterinarian. After acquiring the medication, you have to know how to use it. This includes dosage information, the typical route of administration, how frequently to administer the medication, and how to adjust the route of administration if necessary. For example, due to the small size and fragile nature of the dragon snake, I never give them injectable medication. However, in some medical circumstances, such as a severe respiratory infection, there's inflammation in the lining of the throat, which often rules out oral administration as well. To combat this, I have to convert some medications in a form that can be nebulized. This often requires a bit of chemistry. Knowing the solubility of the medication, what it dissolves in, and the ratio of solvent to medication are all important aspects of preparation when keeping the species. I anticipate a lot of people that may keep wild-caught imports may disagree that all of this is necessary. And while I would agree that it isn't a requirement of keeping this species, your best chance of success will be through careful preparation, knowledge, and experience. Now that we have covered all the mundane medical factors of keeping dragon snakes, let's discuss another potentially difficult challenge. Feeding. What's interesting about dragon snakes is that they actually have quite the ravenous appetite. However, depending upon the locale in which your dragon snake was collected from, they may be accustomed to certain species of fish, frogs, and tadpoles found in the region from which they're from. All of that said, while I've heard a lot of keepers have had a difficult time feeding them, I personally have never had a problem getting them to eat. Using a varied diet of mollies, guppies, swordtails, tree frog tadpoles, and adult tree frogs, my dragon snakes have always eaten from me within the first week or two of acquisition. I have recently been successful in feeding the frog blend reptilinks, meaning frozen thawed options for this species may be a possibility in the future. That said, I wouldn't count on it. Live feeders are the preferred option for dragon snakes. They do not and should never eat more standard feeders such as rodents, and any attempts to convert them will only lead to their demise. Now that we have covered the more difficult aspects of keeping dragon snakes, we can discuss the more simple matter of husbandry. As I mentioned previously, the husbandry for the dragon snake is relatively simple. They require high humidity, between 80 and 90% or more, little to no external heat, with a temperature gradient of 75 to 77 degrees and never to exceed 80 degrees, plenty of hides for them to seek refuge in, a water dish large enough to comfortably contain the fish and tadpoles you'll be feeding, and a substrate that retains moisture well. I prefer to use a blend of sphagnum peat moss and vermiculite, combined with a drainage layer to help balance the humidity and moisture within the enclosure. I am also experimenting with a more bioactive active approach, with future plans to include a running water feature and a more naturalistic environment. That about covers the difficulties of keeping dragon snakes. I hope I was able to shine a little more insight on the captive keeping of this species, and help the community better understand the specifics behind their fragile nature. All of that said, I care deeply about the dragon snakes and hope that you do too. As an act of preservation, I ask that unless you are 100% confident in your ability not only to keep but potentially breed this species to increase captive numbers, that, for the time being, you leave dragon snakes to those that can successfully keep them, and also in the wild where most belong. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again in the Lair of Legless Legends.